Continue, and temperatures just start to rise. Come Friday and Saturday across the south, we could see those values in the mid-30s.
As the race for number 10 intensifies, we are giving you the chance to get to know our next Prime Minister. We've invited the two candidates to meet you, the GB News viewers, and let you put your questions to them. Head directly to gbnews.uk or send me your questions to questions@gbnews.uk.
Join Alistair Stewart for the People's Forum with Liz Truss. Tomorrow at 5, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up over the next hour. The Tory leadership candidates Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss continue to trade blows of the plans to tackle the cost of living crisis. We'll be getting the latest from MPs, journalists and indeed from the polling guru Sir John Curtis throughout the programme. Former US President Donald Trump has said that his Florida home was raided by the FBI, reportedly connected to an investigation into his handling of official papers. We'll be getting live reaction from the United States. Is it a witch hunt? And as the migrant crisis intensifies, we've got an exclusive breaking story from Mark White, Home Affairs editor. That we'll be bringing you the latest on in just a couple of minutes. As always, do get in touch. You know the email address by now, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or indeed you can tweet me at gbnews. All that and so much more between now and 4. But first, at the top of the hour, the very latest news headlines. Here's Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It's just 1 minute past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Controversial plans to house hundreds of asylum seekers at a former RAF base in Yorkshire have been abandoned. GB News understands the Ministry of Defence has withdrawn permission for the Home Office to use the base at Linton-on-Ouse. The community has been campaigning against the move, which they say would have housed 1,500 people, jeopardising the safety of the village. The number of migrants crossing the Channel this year is on course to hit 20,000 within a week. It's after almost 400 people were intercepted yesterday. Sources on the French side of the Channel are reporting that thousands of people are currently camped around Calais and Dunkirk, waiting to make the journey. A cordon around the site of a house explosion in South London's been extended following the discovery of elevated gas readings. A girl who's thought to be 4 years old was killed when the terraced home collapsed in Thornton Heath yesterday. 3 other people were taken to hospital. Residents say they could smell gas for at least 2 weeks before the incident. The cost of living crisis is expected to get worse, with a consultancy firm warning energy bills could hit £4,200 in the new year. That's around £650 more than Cornwall Insight had previously forecast. Well, it comes after the regulator, Ofgem, announced it's changed the way it calculates the price cap. Energy bills are then expected to be slightly lower in the second half of 2023. Tory leadership candidate Liz Truss says if she becomes Prime Minister, her priority will be to help households.
Well, what I'm doing is making sure people are paying less taxes and also having a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to save people money on their fuel bills. In advance, we'll see what the situation is like in the autumn, but I'm committed to making sure people are supported and I'm committed to growing the economy.
Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says Liz Truss's plan to cut taxes will hurt the party at the next election.
I think public enemy number one is inflation. We've got to get inflation down. If we don't, then it eats away at people's savings. Any money that is handed back to people through tax cuts will be taken away with higher inflation and higher interest rates on the other hand. And of course, we've got an election in 2 years' time. People are going to judge us on the credibility and the fairness with which we approach the current global challenges with inflation, but which, of course, hitting people up and down the country in the UK.
Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says it's wrong to claim that Liz Truss's emergency tax-cutting budget risks becoming an electoral suicide note.
You know, I'd say a gentle warning to Rishi's camp that, you know, blue on blue is not going to help the Conservative Party win the next election. You know, we have to maintain our brand. I think those type of attacks are unnecessary and actually, I think, say more about, you know, that team than it does about Liz Truss.
Thames Water is planning to announce a hosepipe ban in the coming weeks. 2 other companies have already imposed bans as a result of the prolonged dry weather. With temperatures expected to reach the mid-30s, the Met Office has issued a 4-day amber warning for extreme heat across parts of England and Wales from Thursday. A heat health alert is also in place, with vulnerable people being warned they could be adversely affected by the conditions. A court's heard there were red flags in the relationship between the former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs and his ex-girlfriend. Kate Greville says she told detectives it was almost like he was 2 people. She was interviewed 2 weeks after he allegedly headbutted her in November 2020. He's on trial accused of assaulting Miss Greville and her younger sister Emma. He denies the charges against him. The NHS has virtually cleared the backlog of people waiting more than 2 years for a routine operation. In January, more than 22,000 people have been waiting for 2 years or longer for scans, checks and surgery. Now there are fewer than 200 people on that list. Earlier this year, the NHS published a recovery plan to tackle the pandemic backlog. Their next aim is to eliminate 18-month waits. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, back to Darren.
Very good afternoon. It is 6 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Tuesday. We're on TV, online, and of course on your radio. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Do get in touch, by the way, gbviews at gbnews.uk. I'm going to bring with the breaking news stories you may have heard there at the top of the news bulletin. GB News can confirm that controversial plans to house hundreds of asylum seekers at a former RAF base next to a Yorkshire village have been abandoned this afternoon. An official statement, we believe, is due out from the Home Office in the next couple of hours, but it's understood that the Ministry of Defence has withdrawn permission for the Home Office to use the base at Linton-on-Ouse. Well, let's get more on this from the man who broke the story. That's our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, who's with us here in the studio. Mark, let's just get some context, first of all, to all of this. This was a base in Yorkshire that the Home Office thought might mitigate some of the numbers of migrants who are coming here, but that they could be housed there. But there were massive objections from the local community.
Yes, I mean, there is a huge and growing crisis in terms of the small boats that are coming across the channel. We're already at 18,500 this year alone, and that's not including those of the 28,500 from last year who are still in the system as well. All of these people, or most of these people, are being housed in hotel accommodation. It's costing £5 million a day. So Priti Patel had to come up with some kind of a solution that eased the burden on the taxpayer in terms of the money they're paying for hotels, and also wasn't taking all of these hotels out of use as well. And this was one way forward that the Home Office saw as a potential solution, part and parcel with the Rwanda policy of putting some asylum seekers over to Rwanda. Others would be housed en masse in the likes of old Ministry of Defence establishments like Linton-on-Ouse.
Which we're now seeing.
And you can see it's right next to the village there, Darren. The village runs along the perimeter fence of this old RAF base. It's only about 400 or 500 people in this village. They were very concerned about the impact on their community of housing 1,200 young men in their midst, because although they would be accommodated in the base, they're, of course, free to come and go, and many of them would be, according to the villagers, hanging around the village, which has no amenities other than one small shop in the village centre, and that is it. So you can understand the anxiety and upset that the villagers felt. Today, I've been speaking to the campaign group. They're absolutely delighted. But of course, that victory comes on the because of the Ministry of Defence pulling out of something that was agreed. Let's put no finer point on it. The Home Secretary has been stitched up by our colleagues in the Ministry of Defence because, as I understand it, the Ministry of Defence signed up to this deal in December of last year, cross-government deal, to allow this base to be used by the Home Office. Now at the 11th hour, because the first asylum seekers were due in next month, they have withdrawn the permission to use the base. And not only does that put the Home Office in a real predicament in terms of where do we house thousands of asylum seekers. This was part of our plan. We're looking for other sites as well. But in addition to that, of course, they had carried out preparatory work on that base. They'd had officials up there making sure that the accommodation was right for them. So they've already spent some considerable money in trying to prepare the base for use by asylum seekers.
Do we know why the MOD has changed its mind on this? Anyone's guess?
We've heard nothing from the Ministry of Defence. We've heard nothing from the Home Office as yet. This is just what I'm being told. It is true. We are expecting an announcement formally this afternoon. But what the reasoning is, there was a statement that was put out on another news outlet suggesting that the Ministry of Defence required it for other purposes. We've been trying to reach out to them. They haven't responded to us.
And this all, of course, as the strain mounts on the system, in the sense that, you know, those numbers keep going up. Possibility is going to reach 20,000 by the end of this week. And, you know, we're only halfway through the summer.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the policy that was announced with great fanfare in April by Boris Johnson and Priti Patel is now in tatters. That is not an overstatement. We have the plans for Linton-on-Ouse now abandoned, with Home Office scrambling about now to look for other suitable sites to accommodate these people, but they can't just rustle them up like that. They require a lot of preparation, providing you can find facilities that are big enough to do that in the first place. Then if you take the Rwanda policy as well, that's mired in legal challenges and going nowhere anytime soon. So their big plan to send potentially thousands of people off to Rwanda, which would be a big deterrent effect. And then the other plan, of course, in conjunction with that, to put people in significant numbers in these bases to reduce the cost and the burden on the taxpayer at a time when, you know, the government finances are struggling to cope. As I say, both planks are now in disarray.
OK, Mark, as always, thank you very much, and keep us up to date when we get those words in from Home Office and maybe even the Ministry of Defence about why they made the decision. Thank you very much indeed. Mark White there, our Home Affairs and Security Editor, with us in the studio. Let's go to the Conservative MP, Hugh Merriman. He is based down in Sussex, which obviously is on the coast, but also backing Rishi Sunak in this race. And we'll talk about the leadership race in a second. But first, can I just get your reaction? I'm sure you were listening in to what Mark had to say there. It seems that Ben Wallace has stitched up the Home Secretary.
Well, I don't have the details. The first I was aware of this was when I was just watching the intro before waiting to come on. It is obviously controversial where you house those who are seeking asylum, but it's also the case that it's incredibly expensive to house in hotels. They're not the best places to house either. They don't do much for the hotel resorts that the hotels are based in, but also they're not of the best conditions either. So some form of solution needs to be found. But that village looked particularly poor in terms of choice because it's a very small village right on the edge of the base, and anyone can understand the concerns of those living there. So I think we need the Ministry of Defence, if they're to provide the estate, and the Home Office, who ultimately own this policy, to come up with a much better option, which perhaps doesn't impact one small village in the exact same way. Or maybe we need to look at more urban settings. But it doesn't work at the moment, just having hotels housing. It's expensive and it's not the best accommodation for anyone.
Is it fair to say that Mark is right in that the government's current immigration policy seems to be in tatters? No one's going to Rwanda, and even the MOD is not prepared to house them in this country, while at the same time, record-breaking number of migrants cross the Channel. I mean, it's been a complete and utter failure.
Well, of course, I'm on the East Sussex coast, so I know all about the concerns people have about small boat crossings, the dangers to those that are on the boats, but also the fact that as a country, we have finite resources. So it's essential that we look to overturn the ruling that really halted the Rwanda project in its steps. That's something that I back hugely. I know both leadership candidates do. And I'm very confident that all steps will be taken to ensure that that policy can continue. So yes, more urgency needed, but also more joined up government so we don't have decisions like the one we've just been discussing this afternoon.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about the next government because, of course, there is a battle taking place this summer between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, who you are backing. Why would Liz Truss's emergency tax-cutting budget be an electoral suicide note?
So I think the concept there is that at a time when people are going to be hit with massive energy bills, to be giving in the first few days back in Parliament a tax cut to the wealthiest, bear in mind that the national insurance rise doesn't apply to 70% of the workers because Rishi Sunak took them out when he increased the threshold for national insurance on the 6th of July. So the optics are, if you're wealthy, if you're the Prime Minister, you're going to get a national insurance tax cut of £1,600. If you're a pensioner at a time when you're facing energy bills that are going to be astronomical, you get nothing. And if you're on the national living wage, you get £59 a year. That is not great optics, and it doesn't show us on the side of the most vulnerable. That's something that Rishi's package so far, £37 billion worth for the summer, has done. But more is going to be needed. And if you spend it all on tax cuts for the wealthiest, A, it puts inflation up because they'll probably spend it on something more than just their utility bills. B, it sends out a terrible message that the Conservative Party is not on the side of those who need it the most.
In saying that, Rishi Sunak, I think, conceded or would like to say that he is prepared to do more now, given the fact that we may well see energy bills reach over £4,000 per annum for the average family this winter, an extraordinary sum of money. I mean, there's recognition throughout Parliament more needs to be done. How is Rishi Sunak going to pay for that, though? Is he potentially going to have to borrow more money to get people through this crisis?
Well, it's a question of choices. I think the issue is if money does need to be spent, and of course we'd rather be spending it on paying back the deficit. There's £20 billion alone in June just on our interest payments, so we've got to par that back. But this is unprecedented. People on fixed incomes, on low incomes, are going to be paying energy bills, say, of over £4,000 come January, and the cap only went up from £1,200. Just that would have been a year previous. So where do people find that money from? It's right that the government is on their side, but the government can't be on their side if it's cutting taxes for the wealthiest or corporation tax rises not going up for businesses. It's about choices. And I think Rishi's choice is to protect the most vulnerable, protect the pensioners, because they're going to need the help the most rather than those who have wealthier means and can perhaps afford it.
And that's all very well and good, but my question was, how's he going to pay for it? I mean, what I'm trying to say is, having railed against it this entire campaign, is the former Chancellor, is Rishi Sunak prepared to borrow money to help try and get people through this winter? Because it's going to cost a lot of money if the government are going to bail people out. Where's the money going to come from?
Well, he's not railed against it. The package that he put together, giving £1,200 to...
No, he's railed against further borrowing, though.
No, he hasn't. He's actually said that he will stand by and be ready to put more money into the most vulnerable's pockets if that's needed. And if that does mean more borrowing, then of course that will be needed. But that's what we're talking about, the most extraordinary of times when people's bills will go up from £1,200 to £4,500. Of course you stand by those people who are the most vulnerable. As I say, he's done that with a £37 billion payout, which isn't even yet paid out in full. So there's still money to come through. What he said is that if those bills do go up again, he'll look at it again. And I think that's the kind of reassurance that we need, rather than people feeling that you've got a government that's only on the side of the wealthiest and the biggest businesses. It's time to stand by the most vulnerable, and that's what he's promised he'll do, and that's why I back him.
OK, Hugh Merriman, as always, thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. Enjoy the good weather down there on the south coast. Thank you, Hugh. For joining us here on the programme. Let's bring in Kevin Schofield, political editor of the HuffPost, to react to all of this. Kev, afternoon to you. We'll come on to the leadership race in a second. But first of all, I don't know if you've been listening in to what Mark White had to say in our discussion there with you about this migrant issue. He, as the Minister of Defence, have slightly stitched up Priti Patel. I mean, it does seem that the government's much lauded kind of migrant management announcement back in April of this idea of using Ministry of Defence sites in this country and Rwanda has completely fallen apart.
Yeah, I thought Mark White, whose excellent scoop it was, hit the nail on the head earlier. You know, this was announced at Easter time with great fanfare, a lot of controversy around about it. You'll remember from the time, but it was hailed by Boris Johnson and Priti Patel as perhaps not a silver bullet, but certainly a very strong deterrent factor in trying to stop people trying to cross the channel in small boats. But yeah, the two main planks now, first of all, the flight not taking off and it becoming now bogged down in legal arguments, that's fallen apart. And now the second plank being this MOD base up in Yorkshire, that's no longer going ahead now either. So really, you could say that the policy itself has completely collapsed. And whoever the next Home Secretary is, whether it's still Priti Patel or more likely, I would assume someone else will be given the job by the next Prime Minister, that's going to be their number one priority, I guess, coming in, is how on earth are they going to revive this policy, which, as I say, was being hailed as a magical solution to the immigration problem. And now it's fallen to bits. So really, yeah, it's back to square one as far as the government's concerned. And yeah, it doesn't look like this policy is going anywhere fast, really.
And the big question is, where's the Prime Minister in all of this? I mean, this is part of his legacy, so it seems. And he's in Downing Street. He's back from his holiday in Slovenia. And yet he's nowhere to be seen. We haven't heard from him for weeks.
No, he just seems to have decided to take August off, as far as we can tell. You know, his spokesman was asked yesterday whether there was going to be any intervention on the cost of living crisis. We were told no. That was a question for his successor. I mean, given that is the main political issue on the agenda right now, it does rather beg the question, what is the point of Boris Johnson remaining in office, really, for the next few weeks if he's not actually going to be doing very much? And yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if Downing Street respond to this story as well. But I mean, it just looks as though Boris Johnson has decided, I'm gone this time next month, so why bother rocking the boat, getting involved in anything, which rather flies in the face of the argument we were given at the time, because there were some Conservative MPs, when he announced his resignation, who were saying that he should go straight away. And he said at the time that no, he wouldn't be going anywhere until a new leader was in place. He still had an agenda to pursue that he was elected on back in 2019. But, I mean, I can't even think of anything off the top of my head that he's actually done since then. And it doesn't look like he's going to be doing anything between now and September the 5th when the new leader is announced. So yeah, it's all a bit strange, really.
It really is quite extraordinary in many regards when you put it like that. And all this, while we've got yet another hustings tonight in another part of the country, in Darlington, between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. I mean, we're going to learn anything new? We're going to learn anything we haven't heard about 10 times before?
Probably nothing new in terms of policy. I mean, the main issue today is now the cost of living crisis, the energy price cap. We expect it to rise to over £4,000 come January. And this is going to send millions of people into serious hardship. But again, this morning we had Mark Harper, who's a Rishi Sunak supporter, essentially ruling out any prospect of Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss and Boris Johnson sitting down to try and thrash out even an interim arrangement before September. So that's off the table. So I would imagine tonight there'll be a fair bit of back and forth over Liz Truss's comments to the Financial Times at the weekend, when she said basically her priority was lowering taxes rather than handouts, as she described it, for people struggling to pay their bills. The Sunak camp have leapt on that. You had Dominic Raab obviously this morning in the Times saying that's electoral suicide. And now the Rishi Sunak camp have come out and said that she is divorced from reality. So they're really cranking up the language. It's really doing a lot of damage, I think, to the Conservative Party brand. But all the opinion polls suggest that it's not really making much of a difference to Liz Truss's popularity with the Conservative membership. It would be a huge surprise, I think, if she weren't to become the next Prime Minister on the 5th of September.
Indeed, a month, I think, or 4 weeks from today. Kevin, thank you, as always. Kevin Scofield there from the HuffPost joining us down the line. Kevin, thank you. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll be talking to John Curtis about the likelihood of Liz Truss becoming leader of the Conservative Party. What do the polls show? And we're going to be in the United States. Pretty feisty debate on Trump after that raid on his home in Florida. Is it a witch hunt to stitch up against the former president? Or, potentially, has he broken the law? That and much more. Just a couple of minutes.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Very welcome back. Let's get more on the Tory leadership race now and turn to Professor John Curtis, who joins us down the line, the doyen of his industry. John, we talked, 10 days ago, was it? A week ago? You were saying, frankly, at the time, rightly so, there wasn't enough evidence to really back up the assertions that Liz Truss should be the front runner. We've had a couple of more polls in since then. What's your impression now? Has the game changed, or are you still saying it's still pretty uncertain?
Well, we've had 2 opinion polls from 2 organisations that got a pretty good record on polling the Tory membership. One from YouGov that put Ms Truss at 60%, Mr Sunak at 26%. Another from the Conservative Home website, virtually identical, 58% for Truss, 26% for Truss. As a result of that, I think, in fairness, we have to say that there has been a tendency not to take so much notice of a third poll from Techney, for whom this is the first time they've been trying to do this kind of exercise, which put the race much narrower. So certainly it looks as though at the beginning of this month, Liz Truss was well ahead. What we do have to say is, one, that these polls are now themselves about a week old, and 2, what we won't know as yet is to what extent the way in which the agenda for this campaign, in a sense, has been overtaken by the cost of living crisis, and an argument between the 2 candidates over what was essentially at that stage about the macroeconomic management of the economy, whether or not we should be concentrating on in trying to avoid further inflation, Mr Sunak's line, or whether we should be focusing on trying to get growth, which was Ms Truss's line. In a sense now, the question that both of them have been presented with is, what are you going to do for those who are at the bottom end of the income scale, whose incomes are just simply not going to be able to cope with the projected increase in energy prices in particular? And as a result of that, I think both candidates, to some degree, have struggled to keep up with the agenda. Now, whether or not any of this is going to make any differences to the views of Tory members, probably most of whom are not at the sharp end of the cost of living crisis, but who knows, we yet don't know. But I think that's the one question that's still hanging in the air.
Question I would assert, John, and that is that we've also made this assumption, all of us, that apparently as soon as the ballots land on the doormat, most Conservative members, they put an X through whoever they back, and that's it, all over. Most people don't wait until the last minute. How true is that assumption? And if it is true, again, what impact do you think that might have had?
Well, it's undoubtedly true that people are more likely to fill in their ballots sooner rather than later. Although, one certainly heard anecdotally a number of people saying, including some Tory MPs, saying, well, actually, I'm going to wait a while. I'm going to see how this plays out. So maybe they won't all go in. But I think, undoubtedly, it is to Liz Truss's advantage that, as of the beginning of ballots going out, she was ahead, and that does give her a bonus. And, the truth is, Mr Sunak is playing catch-up, and it's a very difficult game to play, not least because at the end of the day, I think one of the crucial reasons why Liz Truss has done as well as she's done is she started behind. She wasn't the MP's favourite by any means. She only just managed to get on the ballot. But as all the other challenges to Mr Sunak faded away, Liz Truss, in a sense, has taken the campaign by the scruff of the neck. And I think she's demonstrated that Mr Sunak might be the master of digital technology and the great video. But I think Ms Truss's strength has been the person who's been able to come up with the narrative that A, explains who she is, and B, defines her opponent adversely. I'll just take one example. So that story that Liz Truss tells us about the fact that she was brought up in Paisley and in Leeds, and she's an ordinary girl from an ordinary background, in contrast to Mr. Sunak, who is the posh boy who went to Winchester, who never had any working class friends. Now, we can dispute that narrative. You know, the truth is, Miss Truss was brought up in pretty posh parts of both those places. Her father was a professor of mathematics, not exactly an ordinary background. But the point is, she has played that narrative to her advantage, and she's done this in a number of other respects as well. Whereas Mr. Sunak almost to some degree sometimes looked as though he's been trying to have an intellectual argument about how to manage the economy and not realising that in politics, you've got to tell a story. And I'm not sure that Mr. Sunak as yet has demonstrated the art of telling the story that makes people resonate with what he's trying to achieve.
John, just very quickly, if I can, very quickly, if you can, someone else who's not possibly told a story is Keir Starmer, in the sense that when you look at those polls that have come out since we last spoke, actually, yes, Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss are doing pretty well against Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I mean, the Labour Party is still only running at around 40% in the polls. They're no higher than they were in the autumn of 2020. And when voters get asked, they say they really don't understand what Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party stand for. Both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, we found quite a few holes in their campaigns, their camp pledges, and some of their utterances during this campaign. But the truth is, do we know what the Labour Party's stance on the cost of living crisis is? I'm not sure we do.
John Curtis, as always, bit of a legend. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Professor John Curtis there from Strathclyde University, joining us down the line from Glasgow. OK, we're going to take a quick pause on the briefing. Coming up in a couple of minutes, though, going to be discussing that FBI raid on Donald Trump's Florida home. We've got his former assistant, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, and Joe Biden's former chief of staff in a feisty debate in just a couple of minutes. But first, let's bring you up to date with the news. It's back to Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 3:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Controversial plans to house hundreds of asylum seekers at a former RAF base in Yorkshire have been abandoned. GB News understands the Ministry of Defence has withdrawn permission for the Home Office to use the base at Linton-on-Ouse. The community has been campaigning against the move, which they say would have housed 1,500 people, jeopardising the safety of the village. The number of migrants crossing the Channel this year is on course to hit 20,000 within a week. Almost 400 people were intercepted yesterday. Sources on the French side are reporting that thousands of people are currently camped around Calais and Dunkirk, waiting to make the journey. A cordon around a site of a house explosion in South London has been extended following the discovery of elevated gas readings. A girl thought to be 4 years old was killed when a terraced home collapsed in Thornton Heath yesterday. 3 other people were taken to hospital. Residents said they could smell gas for at least 2 weeks before the incident. Energy bills could end up being higher than first thought, with a consultancy firm warning the price cap will hit more than £4,200 in January. That's around £650 more than Cornwall Insight previously forecast. It comes after the energy regulator Ofgem announced it's changed the way it calculates the price cap on bills. Thames Water is planning on announcing a hosepipe ban in the coming weeks. 2 other companies have already imposed them. With temperatures expected to reach the mid-30s, the Met Office has issued a 4-day amber warning for extreme heat across parts of England and Wales from Thursday. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.211 and 1.182 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,483 and 67 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back. It is 22 minutes to 4 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. You're watching the briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, or indeed listening on the radio, or maybe even watching across the world. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Do get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Let's turn to the United States now, because overnight the former US President Donald Trump revealed that MI5 agents had raided his Florida home at Mar-a-Lago. Agents executed a search warrant, entered the house and opened, apparently, the former president's personal safe. The search is reportedly connected to an investigation into Trump's handling of official papers. Mark White has the very latest.
Overnight, police blocked off the entrances to Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate as a team of FBI agents searched through his Florida home. The former president was in New York at Trump Tower at the time of the raid. But in a statement, he said these were dark times for the nation. As dozens of Trump supporters gathered outside Mar-a-Lago, his lawyers said FBI agents had broken into a safe in the property and removed papers. The raid was met with anger on the streets here as supporters claim Donald Trump continues to be the victim of a state-orchestrated witch hunt.
In my own opinion, I think it's another unjust, made-up thing like the impeachment hoaxes.
It never has happened before. They should go after things that are clearly a violation.
In my opinion, this is communism. Right here, you can see where I'm from. I live this. I know what this is all about.
The raid is reportedly linked to an investigation into Donald Trump's handling of official papers after he left office. All official documents are supposed to be handed over to the National Archive at the end of a president's time in office. In February, the National Archive said it had retrieved 15 boxes of papers from Mar-a-Lago. The agency told Congress the documents included some marked as classified.
This is an apolitical investigation. This was something that was signed off by Christopher Wray, the FBI director who Trump himself approved and appointed, and approved by a judge as well.
We will never give in, we will never give up.
There is intense speculation in the States about whether Donald Trump intends to run for office again in the 2024 presidential elections. And at the Conservative CPAC conference in Texas at the weekend, the former president continued to hint he may well take another run at the White House.
We have to take this chance to shatter the corrupt Washington establishment once and for all. We have to run aggressive, unrelenting and boldly populist campaigns. Populist, we want to be populist. We want to love our country. That's what we want.
Friends of the former president, including GB News presenter Nigel Farage, say they're in no doubt the FBI is being weaponized against Donald Trump.
To any fair-minded person, they're going to say, how on earth can this be happening in 21st century America? What have we become? A banana republic? And actually, in terms of the electorate and fair-minded people, it will play very heavily in Donald Trump's favour.
It's unclear whether the FBI intends to go any further with its investigation now that papers have been recovered. As for Donald Trump, he's clearly smarting from this intervention. Many supporters believe it may only serve to stiffen his resolve, ensuring he does decide to run for office again in 2024. Mark White, GB News.
Well, let's speak to the former Deputy Assistant to President Donald Trump. That is Dr. Sebastian Corker, who joins us down the line from Washington this afternoon. Hello, Sebastian. What are your thoughts on what happened yesterday at Mar-a-Lago?
I'm horrified. I'm shocked. As the child of those who escaped communism, my father was liberated from a political prison in Hungary in 1956. I never thought I'd see this in America. The FBI, an organization I've worked with for many years. Before I joined the administration, I trained FBI agents on counterterrorism issues, thousands of them. The idea that they'd now become equivalent to the Stasi or Gestapo, just a political arm of the Democrat Party and the Bidens, is an outrage. And the idea that my former boss, President Trump, mishandled classified information. In America, it's very simple. A former president maintains all his clearances to the highest level. There's no way you can mishandle them if you are the man for whom the documents were written. And if you compare this to what happened to Hillary Clinton or to Bill Clinton's former national security advisor, Sandy Berger, she stole 33,000 classified emails, put them on a private server. The director of the FBI admitted it. Nothing happened to her. Her home wasn't raided. Her husband's national security advisor, Sandy Berger, before he died, admitted that he smuggled from the National Archives classified information that embarrassed the Clintons with regards to al-Qaeda. He literally looked the story up, stuffed them down his underpants and his socks, and walked out of the National Archives. Was Sandy Berger's home raided? It wasn't. This is a witch hunt, and it's only happening because the senile old man in the White House has the lowest popularity of any modern president just 18 months into his term. They know President Trump is going to run, and they are desperate to stop him. It is that transparent, Darren.
Play what about Ray, as in, like, let's talk about President Trump rather than others who aren't here to defend themselves, and indeed, in the case of Hillary Clinton, where no charges were brought. Are you 100% sure, Sebastian, 100% sure that President Trump has not committed a crime?
Absolutely.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Idea, because I worked for him, and the idea that
I mean, I work with lots of people. I cannot say 100% that they've not committed a crime.
But first, don't tell me who I can't compare someone to, okay? When we have the confessions of people, when we have
I didn't talk about you comparing people. I said I don't think you should be... We're here to talk about President Trump. Let's talk about President Trump. Let's not talk about other people.
Actually committed crimes and didn't have their house raided. That's the point, Darren.
So you're 100% confident that he's not committed a crime?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you understand that the classification system in America, the 17 intelligence agencies, exist for one purpose and one purpose alone, to serve the incumbent president of the United States? The president, should he so wish, could give his pet dog a top secret clearance, and he could strip the highest general of his clearance because it serves the president. You can't misuse the classification system if it's built for your purpose. You know what this is as well as any. It's like Nigel said, any reasonable person knows this is an attempt to stop President Trump, and they have failed. 2 failed impeachments, January 6th committee, the Russia collusion hoax. This is just their sign of desperation. 9% inflation, 2 million illegal immigrants across the border, a war in Ukraine. Biden's popularity is in the toilet. So what do? Call up the lads at the FBI, Donald Trump's house. It is that simple, and anybody with eyes can see it.
The problem with all that is it's just your supposition. I mean, there's no actual evidence for what you're suggesting here. You're just adding 2 and 2 together. You might get 4, you might get 5. We don't really know. I mean, you've got no actual evidence for this. All you're doing is suggesting all of this.
Why did GB News invite me on this show?
Well, to listen to what you've got to say, but the whole point of when you come on this programme... Sorry, Sebastian, when you come on this programme, you've got the right to assert what you've got to say, but I've also got the right to question what you've got to say. That's how this process works.
Don't invite me on the show. If you want somebody who actually worked in the White House, who still has a top secret clearance, to give you his analysis, I'll give it, okay? But don't say that, oh, you don't have any proof. I'm not a stinking investigator who's running the raid. Go and find one of them if you think you can.
No, but you're suggesting that this is all trumped up, no pun intended, that essentially that you're 100% certain he's not committed any crimes. You're asserting that. I'm allowing you to assert that on this programme. I'm merely asking, have you got any evidence to support that? You clearly don't.
I'm in the White House because I know the man. I know his love of country and the idea that, what, stealing secrets to do what with them? Exactly. What's your supposition, Darren? Give me your talking head expertise on this.
I'm not here to suggest... I've no idea. That's my point. I've no idea whether Donald Trump has committed a crime or not. That's my point. I don't know. Clearly, the FBI think there's enough evidence to suggest he may have done. That's why they're investigating him. You're 100% certain he hasn't. I'm merely asking how you're 100% certain he hasn't.
You don't answer the question, then don't ask it, my friend.
OK, well, I'm sorry. The whole point is we get people on to... face interviews. I ask the questions, they answer them. You can say what you like, but I think the whole idea is that you are there to answer questions.
Okay? It's not a court of law. It's a TV show, okay? You get me on here because of my experience and my former position and what I do today. That's why you ask me questions. You want to have a court of law? You become a judge. You put on the gown and the wig and you can be the judge. It's not a court of law, my friend.
Indeed, all I'm saying is if you're going to make assertions, you have to expect that they may well be questioned. That's all I'm suggesting. OK, Sebastian, as always, appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed, Sebastian Gorka, to join us. Let's speak to Susan Platts, who is the former Chief of Staff, actually, to President Joe Biden. Susan, I'm sure you had to listen to what Sebastian had to say there. I mean, there is a feeling, is there, among many people that they do think this is a bit of a stitch-up. There have been allegations made against President Trump in the past on things like Russia, for example, that turned out to be blatantly untrue. And this is part of the same narrative.
What we just listened to was just amazing. It was lies, deflect, lies, deflect. Who cares about the truth? There are about 30-some% of these extreme MAGA folks. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about the fact that the rule of law is for everyone. No one is above the law. These guys talk about law and order, but when it comes to them, throw it out the window. I mean, what's happened here is unprecedented, for sure. It's shocking. Is it surprising? Not in the least. And we all know in order to get warrants, you have to have a lot of evidence. Clearly, they thought national security items were at risk. Your fellow before me said, what's he going to do with it? I don't know what he's going to do with it. Who knows what he's going to do with it? He just had the Saudis at a golf tournament in New Jersey. I don't know what he's going to do with it. Do you?
Well, we don't, but we also don't know if he's done anything wrong. I just come back to my original question, though, Susan, which is essentially that there's been lots of stuff said about President Trump in the past. He's been investigated quite a lot in the past. It's been found that lots of that is simply being made up, perpetuated, it must be said, by some people within the Democratic Party. It is not then a surprise that many people feel that there is a witch hunt how to stop President Trump.
I can't say he's been investigated that much. He has undergone 2 impeachment trials. That's political. That's not law and order. You have to present evidence to do this. We have it's the Fourth Amendment, I guess, right to a seizure. You have to have proper evidence. You have to go through the proper channels through a judge in order to get a search warrant. You have to have some sort of realization that there really has been a crime that's been committed. And the fellow who's head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, was a Trump appointee. So you can't turn around and say, it's a Democratic plot. When you break the law, you have to be willing to pay for your crimes. And what we're investigating now are crimes. Maybe he didn't break, but we do know he took a lot of top secret documents out of the White House. You're not supposed to do that. There's a Presidential Records Act. You're not supposed to do that. And we just don't know. So this is why, many of us were kind of getting a little anxious about why aren't we doing any more investigation? Well, we're thrilled it's here. It's unprecedented. And it is really a sorry state for where we are. But the good news is we're going to investigate and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Well, we are, and as I was saying, Sebastian, we don't know how that investigation is going to go, and we can't really sit here and speculate what's going to happen either way because, frankly, we don't have the evidence or we don't know the full details at the moment. What we do know is or we can speculate is the impact this might have politically. Isn't there a sense, though, that actually for lots of people who like President Trump, millions of Americans, they are deeply frustrated by this, and that this investigation into a former president, a man who was elected to the White House, is only going to likely to divide America even more. It's only going to likely to entrench those opinions on either side even more.
But if he's broken the law, no one is above it. We know, we have on tape the former president of the United States calling the election officials in Georgia, find me 11,600 votes. We don't do that in this country. So at some point here, we have to do all the investigating, and if he's guilty, he will pay.
In saying that, Sebastian Gorka is right in saying that Joe Biden's not having a good time of it at the moment. I mean, he's passed an enormous climate change bill. We know that. And, of course, the assassination or the killing of the al-Qaeda leader in Afghanistan. But his poll ratings are pretty low, and it's looking pretty nasty for the Democrats going into the midterm elections in just a couple of months' time.
Well, that's true. But you know what? Barack Obama was pretty low, too, in midterms.
Not as low as this, though. Not as low as this.
Not as low. That's true. But you know what? They also didn't have people on the far extreme right, these MAGA extremists, trying to take away everybody's rights but their own. And I feel bad that they just followed the emperor who has no clothes blatantly down the street while he's breaking law after law after law. We're on a roll. Joe Biden is on a roll right now. He's kind of got us out of a lot of COVID. He's got the shots in the arms. He's got the tests. He's got the drugs. He's passed the infrastructure bill. He's passed inflation busting bills. He's helping with control costs of drugs. Let me tell you, we're on a roll. And it takes a while to get stuff done. It doesn't happen overnight. Donald Trump didn't do one flipping thing when he was in the White House except accuse other people of political misdeeds.
Well, I mean, that's not blatantly true. I mean, he did achieve some things. But Susan, I come back to this fundamental point here, is that, you've got Sebastian Gorka saying, essentially, I'm certain he didn't break the law. You implying he did break the law. My point is we don't know. And this is what's wrong with American politics. Instead of allowing due process to carry itself out and for the FBI to ultimately conclude that everyone's already made up their mind, it seems. And that's not good for American
we are allowing due
society.
Process. That's what we're doing. And that's what the MAGA extremists are complaining about, because this is due process. This is to get to the bottom of this and find out if there were laws broken. That's what this is all about. They want to say, okay, look here or look there. They want to do misdirection. But this is what we do in this country. No one is above the law, and we will investigate. And if there are crimes committed, people should pay.
Really appreciate your time this afternoon, Susan. Thank you very much indeed. Susan Platt there, former Chief of Staff to President Joe Biden. Thank you. Lots of you getting in touch, particularly about what's happening with the migrant story that we talked to Mark White about earlier on in the programme. Kathy says, it strikes me Priti Patel gave no thought to the residents of this village. This is a good result for the locals who would have had their lives turned upside down. Richard says it's time to set up coastal defences just like a military war and stop patrolling the channel. And Linda says, I think that if we should get to the point in the Conservative leadership ballot where one candidate reaches the winning threshold and it would be impossible for the other candidate to make up what is left, then it should be halted and a new leader announced imminently. Interesting thought, that. OK, that is it from me for today. Always get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Colin Brazier is up next between 4 and 6 this afternoon. Stay tuned for that. I will be back in a couple of weeks on holiday from now on in. But let's bring you the weather this afternoon. It's pretty nice across much of the country. I'll see you soon.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. Lots more blue sky to come and lots more rising temperatures. We have just issued here at the Met Office this morning an extreme heat warning for Thursday until Sunday, where temperatures will again get into the mid-30s across parts of the south, potentially causing disruption. High pressure is controlling our weather, and as we go towards Friday and Saturday, we tap into slightly hotter air, so the temperatures will just go up a notch. Back to this evening, and for most it's a balmy summer's evening, a bit breezy across Kent and certainly breezy across northern Scotland, where there is quite a lot of cloud. May even be one or two light drizzly showers here and there. But for most, it's a dry evening, a dry and a clear night as well. Maybe some mist and fog patches forming through the early hours. Quite a warm one, temperatures staying in the teens in most urban areas. Certainly a very warm day to come on Wednesday. Any early morning mist and fog across the east should disappear, as it should across Northern Ireland. The cloud in northern Scotland, though, is likely to stick around over Shetland, the Western Isles, but should turn brighter, I suspect, over northern parts of the mainland up through Orkney and elsewhere. Just lots and lots of sunshine, hot sunshine as well. Temperatures a few degrees up on today's values, getting into the low 30s across parts of the south. The coast will always be a little cooler. The cloud and rain will just trickle a little further into parts of northern Scotland during Wednesday evening. Otherwise, again, most places having a fine Wednesday evening, leading to another hot and sunny day on Thursday. Again, just parts of eastern England could be susceptible to a little bit of low cloud and mist, and a bit more of a breeze coming into eastern areas will maybe reduce the temperature across the East Anglian coastline a little bit on Thursday. But elsewhere, again, another hot day with temperatures more widely over 30 Celsius across the south and generally in the mid to high 20s quite widely. A little cooler with that thicker cloud across the far north of Scotland. Lots more sunshine to come as we head into the weekend. And as I said at the start, temperatures rising that much further. For more details on that warning, check out the Met Office website.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast.